kind of want to wear one. Hello and welcome to the final day of our 6 days in London. This video is about day 6 in London, which was Tuesday the 29th of January. And although we technically left on the 30th, the next day on the Wednesday, this was the actual last day that we had to explore London itself. And what better way to explore London than to go inside the Tower of London? So settle in and get ready for some facts. We booked our tickets the night before online, and if you book online you get about a 15% discount on your tickets. I'll put the link below so that you can check them out, or you can get a London pass if there are a few different London attractions that you're planning on going to, because I think you can save a bit of money that way. But when you book online you just turn up to the ticket collection counter and they give you your tickets. And we also booked the audio tour, which I highly recommend because it was so well done. You just get so much more out of it if you get the audio tour, because they just explain so much more than what's just on the panes that you can read as you're going through the Tower of London. And the commentary is so brilliantly done. I find that when I'm walking around exhibitions like that, I can get a bit lazy and not read all of the panes. But the audio guide is so good because it takes you around the Tower of London and explains things as you go. And it's well worth the £4 that you pay for it. And it's really easy because you just pick it up from the gift shop when you're inside the Tower of London. The day that we visited Tower of London was forecast to be quite rainy and cloudy, which I think was good because there weren't a lot of people there that day, but it was also a Tuesday, so a lot of people were probably working. But the day that we were there were all of these school groups there, so there were all of these children just walking around and exploring the Tower of London with their teachers, so that was kind of cute to see. As soon as you step foot inside the Tower of London, it's like you're transported into another world. Footpaths are all cobblestone, there's people dressed up in old-timey clothing. It's really cool. There are honestly so many interesting facts about the Tower of London that we learnt that day. It would just take ages to explain them all, so I'm just going to explain a couple of really interesting things that I found during the tour. So just as a bit of background, the Tower of London was built by William the Conqueror back in the thousands. The thousands, not like the 1900s, the thousands. I think it was like around 1070. That's the 11th century. I mean, you hear things being built in the 1800s or the 1500s. This was built in the thousands. That is so long ago. So William the Conqueror wanted to build the White Tower, which it wasn't known as the White Tower back then, but it's the central tower in the Tower of London, and it was pretty much built to show his dominance and power over the people of London. Now the White Tower houses exhibitions of horses and clothing and weapons from back in the day, and I would love to show you footage of it, but unfortunately the footage from inside the White Tower corrupt. So yeah, that sucks. As you walk around the Tower of London, the audio guide tells you where to go and key pieces of information. And one of the first gates that you come across when you're in the Tower of London, if you look down where the water used to be, there's all these coins that have been thrown down there just by the public. And it's good because the coins actually get donated to the Poppy Appeal. But unless you're really looking, it doesn't look like there are all of these coins that are covering the floor. Some of the rooms that you come across during the tour have been decorated as they would have been during that time to give you a bit of a feel of how the room would have looked back then, and some of the rooms are just the bare bones. There was this incredible section during the tour where there are all these little ornaments that are on display, and one of the ornaments was this tiny toy soldier on a horse that was from the 1300s, and it was so incredible to be able to look at this toy that was made so long ago and still intact enough to recognize what it is. As you're walking along the walkways that connect each tower, there are these sculptures of soldiers pointing weapons down as if they're under attack, and they're done really well. I think if they looked more realistic, it might be a bit too confronting as you're walking past, but I think because of the way that they're sculpted, it works really well and you really get a feel for where they would have stood and how they would have approached a threat. Another interesting fact about the Tower of London was it was actually a prison for a really long time, and it's where Anne Boleyn was executed. Some of the more wealthy or influential prisoners, like Scottish kings, would bring their servants while they were staying as prisoners in the Tower of London. And some people were even allowed out on shopping trips while they were being held as prisoners. Although for a lot of the poorer prisoners, they had pretty terrible conditions and were tortured as well. And there was a room along the tour that had a lot of the torture devices, and that was very interesting but horrifying to think that they were used on people, and not just something that people came up with for movies, but they were actual torture devices. The other thing that's crazy is exotic animals used to be kept in the Tower of London. There was an African elephant, monkeys, a polar bear. Medieval monarchs would trade exotic animals as gifts, and in the 1200s, Henry III decided to open a zoo. A lot of the animals unfortunately didn't last too long because they were kept in such cramped conditions, but the polar bear was kept on a chain and would be allowed to go and swim in the Thames for fish, and it was still chained up, but can you imagine seeing a polar bear swimming in the Thames? Crazy! There were actually a few instances of animals attacking the public because the public could come in and view the animals. Obviously, they wouldn't have known how to keep them properly, but there are quite a few instances where the animals did attack the public or the handlers. The interesting part is this was kept open until the 1800s, and that's actually how the zoo in Regent's Park was started, was from the animals that were in the Tower of London. People actually still live in the Tower of London to this day. The guards, or the beef eaters, as they're called, because they're allowed to eat as much beef from the King's Banquet as they could, they're still living there so that they can do the changing of the guards and the keys. The keys? They do something with the keys in the afternoon. I can't remember what it's called. I'll put it on the screen. There is just so much history in the Tower of London, from the Raven superstitions to the crown jewels being kept there. It is just worth every dollar doing the tour of the Tower of London, and definitely with the audio guides. It was such an incredible experience, and you could really spend a whole day there if you wanted. They've got cafes and gift shops and things that we didn't go into, but there's so much to see and so much to read and absorb, so much information and history. It's so worth it. If you're in London and you really want to get a feel for the history of London, I highly recommend the Tower of London. It was one of the best days. After the Tower of London, there was only one thing left to do on our list for the day, and that was to go and see Hamilton. We were lucky enough to get tickets to Hamilton before we left Australia, and it was brilliant. While we were watching it, it was really good, but it's just one of those shows that you just keep thinking about afterwards and wanting to listen to the music again, and it was just such an amazing production, and the feat that the actors have to go through to keep up that level of energy and that amount of singing, it's just incredible. I'd really love to see it again just to really absorb more of the story, because it's so full on when you're sitting there and watching it for the first time that I think it's one of those shows that you need to see twice just to really fully enjoy the experience. But that was it. That was our 6 days in London. I still can't believe we're in the UK. It still feels super surreal. We've been here now for over a month and it's been so much fun. The next day we left our Airbnb and jumped on a train to get to our first house sit here in Stamford, and that's where we've been for the last 5 weeks. We've been looking after a beautiful 12-year-old golden retriever named Jake, while the homeowners have actually, ironically, been holidaying in Australia and New Zealand. Once this house sit is over, we'll be heading back to London for a few days, I think about 4 nights, and then we move on to our next house sit in Cambridge, where we're looking after a cat and a dog. I'm so excited to look after a cat because I haven't had a cat in a few years, so that'll be really exciting. And then after that, we have a house sit in Edinburgh for a couple of weeks as well. So if you want to follow along on our adventures, house sitting and traveling around the UK and hopefully Europe after the Edinburgh house sit, then please subscribe and like this video if you liked it. Comment, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear about your experiences, so please leave me a comment below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.